Hello and welcome to another Thursday here on Viking TV with me, Anne Diamond. And this week we're celebrating art and architecture. And my special guest today embraces both. But before we meet today's inspiring guest, let me share with you something that should lift all of our spirits. And that is the very latest footage of Viking's new ship, the Viking Venus, which has just come into Malta on her way to Britain. As Viking's Karina Hagen said to me yesterday, the path to restart is well underway. And the captain said this is the most beautiful old harbour for Viking Venus's first port of call. Now, as I'm sure you probably know by now, I am going to be her godmother. And just look as she settles into harbour and picks up Viking's founder and chairman, Torstein Hagen. You'll see her docked next to the Viking Sea, and that is the ship of which Karina is godmother. So right now, I'm brimming with pride, and I can hardly believe it is all happening. But if you look at this video, you'll see that it really is. Doesn't that look simply blissful? Wish I was there already. Anyway, back to business. So this week on Viking TV, as I was saying, we are celebrating art and architecture. And my guest today really does combine both in the most extraordinary and compelling way. She is celebrated in both Norway and America, and her works actually travel all over the world now aboard Viking cruise ships, where some find her work reflective and thought-provoking. Others say it's peaceful and relaxing, and some even say perhaps a little melancholic. But the artist doesn't mind. She's trying to evoke emotions through her love of painting walls and floors and murals and doors and windows, and the way light plays in through those windows, creating brightness and shadow. I fell in love with them as soon as I saw them, and so I'm really looking forward to meeting her today. But before we say hello, let me give you a taster of the artist at work. Now here she is, describing why sometimes an art gallery is too neutral a space to show her paintings. So instead, hear this, she actually designed and built a house in which to perfectly show them off. Have a look.
I've thought of this as an exhibition space, but I built it as a house because I want you to have the feeling of comfort of walking into a home, of coming into my home, into my inner space. The subject of rooms started after my mother died when I was 20. And the walls in my life crumbled. I began painting rooms because I needed a framework in my life. I think of the floor as our foundation, the walls the framework. The layers of paint in a painting are like layers of skin. There are many layers that go into building a house. It's also a very long process to paint a painting. I build a painting layer by layer, just like I built this house. It is the similarity between the two that I want to explore. So I took on the role of contractor and architect. I was on the construction site every day in order to feel it. All the time wondering, how does this compare to painting? The house came up exactly as I drew it, and it looks just like what I imagined it would be. There are always mistakes that happen when construction building goes on, but they can be corrected. Each time a plumber or a carpenter, an architect or engineer builds a house, she can learn from her mistakes and do a better job next time, and even a better job the third time. This is not the case in painting. Painting is about venturing into the unknown. Each time I begin a painting, I have no idea what turns it will take.
Wow, isn't that the most wonderful house? Sometimes just in that video, you couldn't actually tell whether you were looking at house or painting. It must be quite an experience to walk through it. Anyway, after immersing myself in Ida's work, I found that sometimes the simplest images are my favorites. For instance, look at this. It's a triptych called Secrets and Shadows. Isn't it brilliant? So let us meet the amazing artist and architect and designer, and would you believe, passionate chess player too, from her home in Norway, Eda Lawrenson. Hello, Eda.
Hello.
And I think I recognize where you're sitting right now. That must be your favorite corner.
And this is where I spend most of my days. This is where I paint, in the middle of the living room.
Mm-hmm. How astonishing is that? And like I said, if the shot were a little tighter, we wouldn't know that that was a painting behind you. It looks like a vista behind you. What an extraordinary work of art you have specialized in. Let me ask you first, though, lockdown, the last year, the pandemic, has it impacted you as an artist?
Well, I had a museum show scheduled, and that was, of course, canceled, postponed now over a year. But as an artist, we're used to things changing and not working out the way we imagined it would. So it didn't impact me that much in that sense. I just moved on. And of course, it's like that when we paint, that the paintings themselves change completely course, and that's life. Mm-hmm. And as artists, as I said, we're good at that. Dealing with change, but it's been a terrible time for the performing arts.
Yes,
it's been a disaster. After all, painters can go into lockdown. That's our everyday life. Has always been to paint in isolation. It's just me and my canvas. That's my life.
And your amazing paints and your wonderful colors. That house is so gorgeous.
Oh,
and so perfect.
You. Thank you.
And the paintings we see on display are equally gorgeous and perfect.
Oh,
there must be an attic or a room somewhere with lots and lots of things all stacked up. Are there? What do you do with paintings that don't work, or ones that you are still working on?
Well, I work on one at a time. All artists are different in that sense. Some work in series, and I work on one or two at a time. And that's, I don't have a big storage. No,
it must be very well organized. Can you let me into a secret then? Because yes. I love your work. And I know so many people who do, but that one I said that was my favorite. I haven't explored all of yours, but the Secrets and Shadows. Why do I love it so much? What is it that I find so alluring about it? Can you explain?
Well, that's. I'm so happy that you like it. My idea was that the background, the painting, is filled. The surfaces are filled with my skin tones, where my skin is the thinnest. Here is, and I tried to match that color so that you have a feeling that it's my skin, it's my body that is encompassing this stool in 3 angles. So you're seeing a stool that has, it's actually for shoe polish that you put inside the stool, and then you close the top and you can put your foot on or sit on it and bend over and polish your shoes. It's never been used for that. I bought it in a thrift shop and was just interested in just what you were talking about, the secret of what's inside.
Yes.
And then the space, the interiors are what fascinate me, what I paint, and in this triptych, the space is defined by the shadow. The object's shadow defines the space for the object, and that's the story.
You feel drawn in almost by the mystery of what might be in the box. And I've noticed you do that a lot with doors, don't you? And openings. There's a mystery behind what might be there. I've got 3 pictures coming up now, which I think show that. You know more about these than me. Hidden Secrets, Nostalgia, and My Palette. If we look at those now, again, you're drawn in to what you can't see and the way the light plays on what you can. See, I want to know what's behind those doors. And in the darker edges, I want to know what's there. So you draw us in. Is that what you meant? Is that what you set out to do?
I guess for me, these rooms are my inner soul, my person, that I think of the room as a body. I have a figurative background from art school, studying the model. So I think of these rooms as portraits, figures, in that sense, that they are a body. And it's mine because I'm in the room painting it. And then yes?
I don't want to interrupt you, but you said in the little clip earlier that maybe what draws you into that sort of feeling is, you said that you mentioned losing your mother and feeling that your own walls, the walls of your life, were crumbling in around you. And maybe
that was 50 years ago, and that was the truth. But we all, when we're 20 years old, must build our own rooms and our platform to stand on and the parameters of our space, and find where we are in the world. That all 20-year-olds have to go through that. I'm an old lady now, so I'm long past tears of having to launch out into the scary world on my own. But it was a theme that I latched onto that I could use and have amazed. Surprisingly enough, it has followed me because it is unending. The room is a universal need, a shelter, and it has changed form every decade in my life as my life has developed. So just as some artists find themselves through nature, I find myself through the room. Henrik Ibsen, our great playwright, said that there are 2 types of people. One type relates to rooms, and the other to nature. And he said, I myself relate to the room. And there you have the stage. And he organized the stage. He was so detailed, and where the players came in through which doors, back to the doors again, he directed them and built up the stage. And for me, that's what it's all about. It's as if the curtain has just lifted and the players haven't come in yet.
Yeah, but there are doors there, and you don't.
There are doors. I set the stage in the painting. Now, the subject is always important to me, but which direction the painting will go, I don't know. I don't know the mood it takes on its own life, because it's a long process. It's not like I'm in one mood one day and another mood the other, because it's these paintings take a month or longer. So there have been lots of ups and downs in the course of that time. So there is no one thing that I want to express, but the image is the starting point.
I love the idea of the universal shelter. That's a beautiful phrase. And yet I gather some people find them melancholic. I don't think I do. I find them peaceful. But do you understand that people sometimes think that?
Yeah, I think they were more melancholic before, when I was in my 20s and 30s, and then now there's more mysticalism. I can't interpret them. All I know is that I have a vision. And that became clear to me when I decided to build this house, that there's a kind of room that I see. And then I wanted to make that happen three-dimensionally and match my paintings, as you said you saw. I wasn't sure if I could make that happen because I'm not an architect, but I did. I just drew it up and walked through it in my mind, as I do when I'm painting. I'm always responding to spaces and forms and objects, but we do that as humans.
What sort of background do you come from? I mean, people hearing you now will hear the traces of an American accent as well as Norwegian, obviously. I mean, you were born Norwegian, but brought up in the USA, weren't you?
Yes. My mother was American and my father Norwegian, and they met in Boston and married, and they lived a short time in Norway and then moved back to the United States. And I've had both countries.
Yes. I gather your father was quite a character. He was probably, I'm told, the last of a whole generation of Norwegian ship owners who came to America as a refuge from war-torn Europe and built lives and raised family and built an empire in a way in America. And he had a cruise ship of his own, didn't he?
Yes. He would be so proud if he knew that I had paintings on these beautiful Viking ships. He started with cruise because he had a vision that this was the future, which it is, but he was too early. So he lost a lot of money on that. But he was right. He just was premature.
Did you ever go on one of his ships?
Yes, I did. I loved it. But I think I would love it more now.
I think so. We've moved on. It's an interesting cruising link, as you said, because Viking love your artwork so much that they've bought several, and some are in a collection planned for another new ship, the Viking Mars. But have a look at this little video made by Viking's own Karina Hagen, who's had a closer look at your work. This says it all.
Eda Lawrenson has dedicated her career to painting rooms. Walls, floors, ceilings, doors and windows. Lawrenson's rooms are quiet, sensitive and full of light. Empty of persons, they still give a distinct feeling of lived life. The marking on the floor reflects the passing of time, and the light piercing through the windows pulls the narrative together and creates a sense of wonder. They are rooms that reveal, yet conceal, as if they were holding a hidden secret.
Everybody here in Viking has got their own view on their favourites, but we all love them, Ida. And I know there's an exhibition planned, I think, for the Viking Mars, the ship that isn't ready yet. And we'll look through them now, but it's the story of 12 paintings. As we look at them, can you tell us what we're looking at and why?
This is the oldest wooden dwelling house in the world at the Folk Museum. It is from the late Viking era, early Middle Ages, 1238, and you can walk inside of it.
Oh.
And it's before the fireplaces, and so they just had a open fire on a dirt floor, and the smoke went out through a hole in the roof. It's before windows.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they realized how to build a fireplace with a chimney, then they lost the hole in the ceiling because that's where the chimney went out. And they couldn't do that until there were windows. So that happened rather simultaneously in the development of architecture in Norway. But to think that this is the oldest dwelling house, wooden dwelling house in the world, is spectacular.
I know, and a lot of people looking at that right now will think that's a photograph, and of course it's not. It's your painting.
Well, the timber. Now you can. That's the door of the main entrance. You can just vision how huge that timber is, and
solid to have lasted so long.
Done by hand. And the Folk Museum is the oldest, or the first open air museum in the world. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. We're going to have a look at that a bit later. Let's move on to the next.
Okay. Well,
picture.
I was just wanted to make a series about my favorite houses at the Folk Museum. So all of these are from the Folk Museum, and the next one that aroused my attention was this beautiful Christigården, and that's a house they celebrate at the Folk Museum. It's from 1761, but even though the owner of the house was wealthy at the time, the family was subject to diseases, and because they didn't have modern medicine. So I tell that story.
Yes.
These very delicate 2 cups. Can you see them? They're so small.
Yes, very tiny.
And
I know there is another one a bit later on in the series, which is just a jug standing on the table, and it's a beautiful painting in itself, but very clearly there is a story to it as well. You talk about the fact that when people realized that washing your hands actually was a very important part of hygiene, it changed the family dynamic, it changed the world. And so just in that painting, you're saying something about folk history.
Yes.
I love that one. Very beautiful again. And as I said, there's a series of 12 of them, and it's a story in 12. That will be going on one of the exhibitions on one of the cruise ships, traveling around the world, spreading the word, which is good to know. How does that make you feel?
Oh, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. Now, this that you just passed, and these two go together. This one is at the Folk Museum, is the city of Oslo's jailhouse.
Oh.
Yes, that's how small it was.
It doesn't look very imposing, does it?
No. And then there's the inside of the jail.
Oh.
And the door to the left there is for men with citizenship. And then the one straight ahead is for on the right-hand side is for women. And then there's a door you don't see on the far right, and that was for men without citizenship. So they were divided by class and gender. Yeah. And then up the stairs, that tiny door was for Hans Nilsen Hauge, who was put in solitary confinement without a court case. He was just locked up. He was a spiritual leader and had an enormous following, and it was not acceptable in those days. We're talking about the early 19th century to preach outside of a church. That was threatening to the church, that people were gathering in farmhouses or barns, and he was a fantastic preacher. And because he had this large following, they locked him up for 7 years. It just about killed him. But he's one of our most famous Norwegians, and so I wanted to tell about him. And his room is that window on the top which reflects the sky, the blue sky.
You see, once again, some people may be looking at your work and not know that amazing backstory, but again we come back to the universal shelter, that there is, you're showing a room, but there is a human story to that room.
And then the next one is a farmhouse. And I wanted to do that because of my American heritage, because so many Norwegians in the middle of the 19th century went to the United States because there was famine. And so this house tells that story of the longing to leave that dark cabin and go to the new world.
Yes.
And that's on the West Coast, where the storms are rough and the land is stony. It's very hard to cultivate food, and still today. And it reminds me of Ireland in that sense.
Yeah. I know that we talked about you being brought up in the States, but you've travelled quite widely. Didn't you spend quite a lot of time in Britain too?
Well, I haven't gone to school there, but of course I've traveled around. I love to travel, especially to museums and study art. I haven't had very much. I haven't gone on vacations. Artists don't go on vacations, but we go on study trips constantly.
When did you first, because I don't think either of your parents were particularly artistic, were they?
Yes, my mother was a painter.
Mother was. Ah. So when did you realize that that's what you wanted to be?
Pretty early, but my mother made me realize how tough it is. And how you have to work very hard. And her difficulty was when she was painting, she felt she should be with her children. And when she was with her children, she wanted to be painting. And so she was so torn. And this was so clear to me, that how important it is to unify your life. And that's part of the reason why I situate myself in the middle of the house and live a very simple life, so that I'm not torn. I don't spend time on vacations or going off, having distractions from my art. It's with me all the time, like brushing my teeth. All of this is tied together. That was something that I learned from her, how important that is, to not feel torn between family and art. You have to make that come together.
Yes.
So that I worked really hard at the very beginning and got that in place, and just realized that you can't just do it a little bit. You have to go all in and really work to make a career.
Well, your career did take off, because as a young emerging artist, I think you won the Edward Munch Prize, and then an American Academy Purchase Prize. I mean, your career took off pretty well, didn't it?
Well, I had a long education. I had 9 continuous years, because I first did a bachelor at Boston University College of Fine Arts, and then I came to Norway and went to the academy for 5 years. So I had a lot of guidance, and then I started exhibiting immediately as soon as I graduated. And building up exhibitions is like writing a thesis paper, doing a doctorate or whatever at each exhibition. And I didn't waste time on small group shows, just solo exhibitions once every other year, so I could really go into depth, just like doing a master's or whatever you would compare it with. And that's how I was able to go into depth. See,
Well,
each exhibition had a theme that things held together.
And you've already explained to us how you love your paintings to reflect something meaningful about the lives that have been lived in those amazing rooms. And that's why you were telling us about the Folk Museum. Shall we have a look at it now? We've got a lovely clip from a video where you actually take us into the Folk Museum. Let's have a look at this now.
Here we are at the Folk Museum in the new exhibition called Tidsrom. I was commissioned to paint this painting to tell about the exhibition of 300 years of time. The story I'm telling here is about an old room with a new light. Light never ages. This painting welcomes us in, was my idea. This exhibition tells the story of Norway in the course of 300 years through objects. And I was asked to paint a portrait of a girl to bring life to the objects. And this girl was from Holmestrand and born in 1751, Maren Ida Lorentzen. And in fact, we are related and 200 years apart. I painted her kind of like myself when I was young. I took that liberty because there were no photographs of her and no paintings either. And she's sewing, which is likely something that a girl from Holmestrand in the 1750s did. Among wealthy Norwegians at the time, it was common to have a lavish and elegant parlor room. The room was originally furnished by a young newly married couple in 1760. Here they welcomed guests and conversed and drank endless cups of tea. The wall murals depicting ports in the Mediterranean suggest that they were well-traveled and cosmopolitan. The half-open doors piqued my curiosity about what secrets might be hidden in the rooms beyond. This is a self-portrait from 35 years ago. I was young in the late 60s. I was a very determined young woman with a punk haircut and the leather vest. We denied everything feminine. It's only recently that I have painted paintings that are not very masculine.
Now, I find that really interesting that you said that there was a time in your life where maybe your work was masculine. What do you mean by that, do you think?
Well, I remember once reacting to a professor saying that in nature, there are no straight lines. And then I thought, and so in art, there are no straight lines, which is not true because we have Mondrian and there are tons of artists. But I thought, aha, I am only going to paint straight lines because this male teacher said, you know, that look at nature, there are no straight lines, therefore painting should not have straight lines. And so I thought then, because every artist in the European art tradition wants to break rules. That's right. So that was one of my issues. And so I said, for the rest of my life, I'm going to paint straight lines. And I will show how great this will be, and strong because of being this feminist that I was, denying all femininity. But that is so long ago, Anne, and we are beyond that as women today. And I'm painting wallpaper. I'm painting.
You're painting murals on walls.
And yes, and there's perfume. And yes, I'm past that.
You're past that, absolutely. I tell you what, though, a lot of people watching now will say, but I mean, that self-portrait is absolutely gorgeous. Why don't you paint more people?
Well, I do portraits sometimes.
Good.
But I did try in the beginning with introducing figures in the rooms, and realized very quickly, this is an important point, that when you have a figure in a room, the figure takes presence, is the most important image in the painting. That's where the focus goes. Even if you put the figure way on the side, or as William Hammershøi did, turned the back to the model and painted just the back, the figure will take dominance, take over the painting. And I'm trying to say something about the room. And if it's about my rooms, my inner soul, you won't get there. You won't see it. I won't be able to convey my image, my vision, if there's a figure there.
I totally see that.
Just be focused on the figure, and then the room will be the background.
The only human being who should be interacting with your room at that time should be you, the viewer.
Or in that triptych you saw with the one object, that object becomes a symbol of a person.
Oh, yeah.
But because it is a metaphor. As a metaphor, it doesn't become a figure. It's just a metaphor for a figure. Do you understand? Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's lovely hearing you explain it.
Oh.
Somewhere else there is straight lines is on a chessboard. Now you're going to have to explain to me your passion for chess. And the fact that you actually play in competitive matches.
Well, I learned to play too late in life. I learned to play chess in my 40s when my daughter was playing. She started when she was 9 years old and learned in school, actually in the United States. That was really fun. And then when we came back to Norway, she continued. And I recommend it to all young parents, because when the children are playing in competitive games, the parents play. So you don't just sit and watch your child play, you can play. And so when she played in the national championship in Norway, year after year, I would sign up and play. and that was really great. But now we've become a chess nation. We weren't that then. This is a long, long time ago. But now we have Magnus Carlsen, and I just love to watch him play. And
you're pretty good, aren't you?
Well, I know how to read the game, and for me, it's like listening to a symphony. When I listen to a symphony, I try to guess what the next sound will be. That's what Leonard Bernstein taught me as a child. He was conductor in New York when I was growing up, and he was so good at teaching children how to appreciate music. And that was one of the things he said, was that you should try to guess what the next melody will be. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do when I watch Magnus Carlsen play on television. I try to guess. I like the slow games because then I have plenty of times to think, will he do this? What will his next move be? Will it be this? Will it be that? And then I discuss it with my daughter or my husband or whatever. We discuss, I think he should do this. No, I think he should do that. And this is, it's so much fun. It's a fascinating game. It's difficult. It's very difficult.
Yes, indeed.
But your life painting is very difficult, and I've been doing that my whole life, and I still don't feel like I get it.
Your lifestyle sounds absolutely idyllic and very restful. But like you said, you've worked at that. I mean, you live almost on like a little island.
Yes.
And your daughter is near, and the animals around you. Tell me about your bees.
Oh, well, we should all have bees, shouldn't we? Save the planet. But it's hard work because by law, bees are domestic animal, or not, they're not animals, but they're domestic, which means that you have to keep them on your property. Well, you can't do that because bees fly off. But the reason for that is when they fly off in swarms, you can't just let them go. You have to go to your neighbors and retrieve them. And that's quite difficult to get a huge swarm of bees into a cardboard box. But I'm learning.
Crumbs. Because
I don't want to kill them. So I have to go get them and bring them home. And we're learning. I've had them, I don't know how many years it is now. I think it's 10 years.
My goodness.
And the honey is amazing because it has a little flavor from the sea. It's like wine, grapes that are along the coast in northern Spain or in France that get that little sea breeze, and how great that is. Well, that works for honey too.
And it's very, very good for you, especially locally grown honey. How do you divide your time then through the day with all of your interests, your obvious love of music, the chess, the family, the painting? How do you divide your time? Are you very structured?
No, I don't believe in structure. So early on, I said to myself that I don't want to have to discipline myself to paint. Because actually that's the hardest thing for me to do, is to paint. It's so much easier to wash the house or, to be distracted. But painting is actually work. And I don't want to have to be self-disciplined. I want to just have such a simple life that I end up painting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That there are no distractions. I'm not going skiing or off on holidays and unpacking. I'm just in this radius of this. It's right here. I'm not unpacking and packing my paints. They're right here with me. Mm. And the painting is ongoing. And does that make sense? It's something that it just is. I am a painter. Instead of saying, I'm going to paint, now I have to paint. Mm. So I begin the day with Neil MacGregor, the former director of the British Museum. I read from his books aloud for an hour to my husband, and then we discuss history and art. And for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, as we eat breakfast. And then we begin the day. And then he continues to paint until 7 at night. And then we watch something silly on television. And then
good.
And then the day's over. Doesn't that sound perfect?
Oh, I think you've got it absolutely right. I really do. I think there are so many people watching right now and say, how can we do that? But it's a bit like the wisest words from my father, who said to me that the trick is to declutter your life and only concentrate.
Declutter.
Absolutely. Well, you only have to look at your beautiful house and your paintings to see that you know about decluttering. I've got some questions from Richard first in New Jersey, who says, I was on a recent cruise on the Viking Orion when I used the Art Guide app on board, and I saw at the chef's table some of your paintings in the Reflections series. I love the way you use light. Now, because I knew that question was coming in, we managed to get some of those Reflections pictures, just so that people could see what you were doing there as well. But they're at the chef's table restaurant on the Viking Orion. Don't know if we can see any now. There, yes, we've got some there. Beautiful examples of your work again.
So, but what was the question? Just about the question?
No, there wasn't. There wasn't a question, actually. He was just saying how much he enjoyed them.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that lovely?
That is.
They are, and a very good place to exhibit them as well. When you are eating, when you're talking, enjoying company, to be able to have those restful images around you. That's one favourite I know of a great many people, because again, you don't know what's behind that door. It must be lovely to see your work being used, I don't know whether that's the right phrase, but certainly shown in that way. So thanks for that. Let's see if we've got some more questions coming in. Oh, Mike in Ontario says, can I download from one of those apps now? Yes, you can, actually. That's a question for me, actually. Apparently, yes, the app is called the Viking Voyager app, and it allows you to explore the ships, things like the artworks and the exhibitions. Oh, here's one, Ida, from Joanna in Salzburg. Do you only paint on big canvases?
No, I paint on big canvases. I like the size of 130 by 160 because then I feel like I physically walk in the rooms. And then I paint, what is this? You can't see the size. The pastels, the ones that you just showed, they're less than a square meter. They are in pastel, and that's why they're small, because they're on a board. And I can move things around quickly. So those are the two. So
another one from Louise in London, who says, how do you think the art world will respond to the pandemic? Is there a new period of art ahead of us
yes,
that may reflect the tragedy and the threat?
I'm not so sure about that. But what is exciting here in Norway is that our art supply shop, we have one main art supply shop, and they have never sold so much materials ever, which means there is an enormous amount of painting going on, and that's very exciting.
Yes, people have, maybe for the first time, a lot of people have the time to think about it, but also need to express themselves in some way. Okay, so Phil and Jess in Sacramento say, have you tried other artistic media like sculpting?
No, well, I had it in school. The sculpting idea of mine that I have tried was this house. This was really an experiment.
Yes. And do you actually live in that house?
Yes. Well, that was not the idea. It was an experiment, a very expensive one.
I'll bet.
But I didn't know how it would turn out because I am not an architect. But I loved it so much. It's like that when you do something yourself. If you build an IKEA chest of drawers, you love it because you screwed everything together yourself. And when I had drawn every single window and door, of course I loved it. And I was just wandering around it, and my husband said, you have to get beyond this and paint. And so he just bought a new easel. I had one in the old house, and he bought a new one, and he said, he plopped it in the living room and said, continue. And so I moved in, and then he moved in with me, and that's how our daughter ended up next door.
Ah, I see.
Old house.
What is your favorite part of the house? Probably where you are now.
Yes, absolutely.
Why? Is it because, I don't know, why is it your favorite bit?
I love to paint in the living room. I love to work where in the nicest room in the house, in the center of the house. I like that whole thing of the creative process being a part of the heart.
Yes, the heart of the home. Yeah. Nick in Edinburgh says, where can your paintings be seen? Is there a permanent display anywhere? And can we buy them?
I have a website. I have a gallery that's on the website. And there's the Blåfjellverket Museum just outside of Oslo has a permanent museum that they call the Eda Lawrenson Museum.
Oh, wow.
And that is open all summer for 4 or 5 months. And now at the Folk Museum, when they open after the lockdown, they'll have my works on permanent display there. And I'm in the National Museum, but that hasn't opened yet either. And yes.
And otherwise, we have to wait for an invitation into your house.
Yes.
And that's where we can see some more.
Yes.
It's been absolutely amazing talking to you today, and a real privilege to see your artwork. May you go on and on doing more and more, because and of course a reminder to everyone that we can see your artwork as soon as we get traveling again. We'll be able to see your artwork on the ocean again.
So exciting for me.
And Karina Hagen sends her love, because she's just realized that she knows your cousin Jan very well. So it's a very small world. And she said
in Norway it is.
She hasn't met you yet, but she absolutely loves your art.
And these Viking cruises are so beautiful. The ships are amazing. And the themes that they have, to go on a Viking trail. Oh yeah, we talked about a riverboat.
Well, I hope to meet you on a riverboat or a cruise ship very soon, because it would be an absolute honor and a privilege. And then you can talk about the artworks, which would be great fun. For the moment, Ida, though, I will leave you in your lovely home. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us.
Thank you.
And let me just tell you, next week on Viking TV is British Isles Week. And my guest is going to be the 19th Earl of Derby, Edward Stanley of Knowsley Hall. Now, how can I leave you without having yet another look at the Viking Venus coming into Malta before heading this way to the British Isles, and the path to some sort of normality again, hopefully soon. See you next week.